All right, I think I can get just started with some housekeeping stuff here. So welcome everyone. I am Cheryl Capitani with the New Canaan Library. And before we get into the thick of it here, just some really quick housekeeping things. You'll see that you can just see our faces on the screen here. This is a Zoom webinar versus a Zoom meeting. What that means is that you cannot be seen or heard. But if you would like to, mention something in the chat to all attendees and to all the panelists here, you can use the chat function here. If you have questions that at the end you want answered by the panelists, please direct those to the Q&A function at the bottom there, and that way we can kind of queue up your questions at the end. I also just want to say how we got to tonight here. This sort of sprang from last pre-COVID, last probably fall. We were doing a puberty talk at the How to Talk to Your Kids About Puberty at the library, and so we had someone come in and talk about that. And there was one slide about LGBTQIA+. And that was the thing that a lot of attendees kept asking questions about. And it was just just people wanting to know, really wanting to understand. And so I after that night, I contacted CARES and I said, look, I think we need to share some information here. This is an information need. That's what libraries do. And CARES jumped right on board. And I'm just so thrilled with all the partners who have jumped on top of this. So thank you all. And I am going to toss now to Stacy Walker from CARES. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi all, I'm Stacy Walker from New Canaan CARES. I'm the Education and Program Coordinator there. A little fun fact about us, recently we just hired a new director, Judy Phillips. She is on the call, but you cannot see her, so I wanted to welcome her. And I also wanted to say how thrilled I am to partner with New Canaan Library, with the Lighthouse, with their LGBTQ youth program, which is also a program of kids in crisis, and of course, Silver Hill Hospital. And we are very excited to bring this presentation to you tonight. The first thing I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about our presenters. First, we have Micaela Scully, she, her, hers, or they, their. She is a licensed clinical social worker who has worked at Silver Hill Hospital for over 7 years, as well in private psychotherapy practice. She is proficient in mood disorders, co-occurring addiction, eating disorders, family systems, LGBTQ individuals, as well as dialectical behavior therapy and cognitive processing trauma work. She has a history of advocacy she has done on behalf of the LGBTQ community, including policy development within the hospital, developing an LGBTQ group for patients, and offering education and support at Silver Hill, as well as beyond the hospital. She currently facilitates a peer support group for transgender and gender nonconforming youth at the Triangle Community Center in Norwalk. Micaela lives with her partner and black cat, Jack, in South Norwalk. And then we have Joe Bilal, he, him, his, and he is a coordinator and lead adult facilitator for the LGBTQ youth group Lighthouse, which is a program of kids in crisis. Lighthouse, now in its 8th year, is a peer-to-peer social support group for the LGBTQ identifying teens and their allies, with nightly meetings in both Stamford and Greenwich. Joe is also a professional author and illustrator with a children's anxiety book due out in March 2021 from Blair Publishing. Joe and his husband David have a 12-year-old adopted daughter and live in Old Greenwich. And we have Ava Smoltzer. She, her, hers, and she is a junior at Stamford High School in Stamford, Connecticut. She identifies as bisexual and has been a part of the Hugs, Helping Unite Gays and Straights Club at Stamford High School since sophomore year. And she is an active member of the local drama and writing clubs. She is a hobby artist and hopes to study international relations and global affairs in university. So welcome all, and I think we're going to kick off with Micaela.
Thank you so much, Stacey. Hi, everybody, and I'm so glad to be a part of this and grateful to be asked to be here. I really appreciate it, and it's really important to me that I grew up in Stamford, and like Ava, and it's very important to me that places like New Canaan and, want to start to learn. And I know that's not just to start, but continue to learn and just do better and be better for our kids and our community. And it's just really exciting to me to always have opportunities like this where I can support and do that. So I have a presentation for you all where I can provide some information. Again, if you have questions throughout, you can throw those in there. We might get to some throughout, might just get to them at the end. We'll do our best. And then Joe is going to speak as well as Ava at the end with some of those questions too. And a little bit more, I'll give, more about me as relevant throughout the presentation too. So I'm going to share this with you. Somebody let me know that we're good. You can see? Okay, perfect. Okay, so title of this presentation is LGBTQIA, Understanding the Challenges and Rewards of Finding Identity. And I, again, also want to thank everybody for being here because you've probably been on, this is probably your 7,000th Zoom call since March. So I really appreciate you being here tonight. That shows level of dedication as well. And I really appreciate that. And we're gonna hopefully make it a pleasant one for you. LGBTQIA, what does that mean? We will talk about that and when you might use those letters versus others, we will discuss that. So I am a licensed clinical social worker. You can use either of those emails right there if you'd like to, and this is going to be recorded, so if you don't catch them right now, you will be able to catch them again later, but if you ever wanted to shoot me questions in the future, you always can do that. So I want to introduce terminology or reintroduce you to terminology related to the queer community and have you have an understanding of the differences between gender identity, expression, and sexual identity. Those are very important to me. I also want us to be able to identify biases, fears, misinterpretations that we might have surrounding individuals' expressions of gender identity and sexual identity. Those might include, but are not limited to, like expected social behavior, sexual behavior, and attraction, right? Like we might have certain expectations of what we think people should or should not be doing based on who they say they are. Also demonstrating some background knowledge on issues unique to gender and sexual minorities and how we can support those we love and people in the community. If you notice there, I said some of the same thing in a couple of different synonymous ways. For example, queer community, LGBTQ community, gender and sexual minorities. Those are all the same thing. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Terms, LGBTQ. This is the probably most widely used acronym to describe sexual and gender minority population. That stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer, or questioning. Some people throw questioning in there as well. That is totally valid. We'll talk about the I and the A. You can throw that in there. It's important to understand that even though this is primarily used universally, some people still feel unheard. It's really not all inclusive. There's no way for us to fit absolutely everyone into the term LGBTQ because we are literally not fitting everyone in it. That's not possible. So, by adding the IA, we are including a couple more folks. So that is at someone's discretion, and there might be different reasons why you might choose to do that. And we'll get to what those stand for. Additional appropriate synonyms might be, depending on the individual, queer community, gay community, sexual minorities, etc. Okay, to start on those, what is sexual identity? Most people have heard this called sexual orientation. A lot of people now use sexual identity rather than sexual orientation. Some people still use sexual orientation. It's not wrong to use sexual orientation. I think people use them fairly interchangeably, but I'll let Joe and Ava comment on that too to hear what their thoughts are on that as well. But it's one's physical and or emotional attraction to a person on the spectrum of attraction. And it's more of a continuum than a spectrum now, actually. I'd like to edit that. Something that I'd like you to walk away from here from is this little triangle. this idea that identity, attraction, and behavior are not always the same. Again, I can identify as bisexual. I can be attracted to a woman, and I can be in a relationship with a man. Okay? It doesn't mean that, you know, my bisexuality is invalid because I in that moment am dating a man. That's the nature of bisexuality, right? That I have the capacity to also date a man. Also, identity. I'm not sure if we've done recent research on this, but when I was in grad school, we had research that said 40% of men who sleep with men identify as heterosexual. So I would say behavior and identity and attraction are certainly not in alignment there, right? So we don't always know what's going on for people in terms of their behavior, how they identify, and what what their attraction actually is. And there are so many sociocultural, familial reasons for that someone might feel, whether it is how they were brought up, whether it is cultural shame, whether it is social shame, whether it is internalized homophobia. We can get a little bit more into those terms, but there are many reasons why that is. Also, keeping in mind sexual identity, we're not calling it romantic identity, right? What have we called it all these years? We've called it sexual orientation or sexual identity. We're automatically sexualizing people. Now, everyone has a sexual orientation, right? Even if it's heterosexual. However, it does sexualize what is also romantic. We need to keep that in mind because it can over-sexualize the community. We don't tend to talk about sexual orientation quite as much for the heterosexual community. It doesn't come up quite as much. It does tend to come up more for the queer community. This term is obviously not to be confused with biological sex or the active sex, but you know, when that comes up, I think that has a lot to do with why this can be so uncomfortable for people. People are really uncomfortable talking about sex a lot of the time. So a few types of sexual minority identities. Most of you likely know most of these. At the top, lesbian, woman attracted to a woman. Gay, a man attracted to a man. Also, women use this term and sometimes use as an umbrella term for the entire community. Some people might say the gay community can be used, but some people feel like it's not all that inclusive for them. Bisexual, person who's attracted to both men and women. That can also be an umbrella term for anyone who is not attracted to exclusively any gender. So that's important to recognize as well. Pansexual, person attracted to a person regardless of gender, recognizing the potential for multiple gender identities. There's been conflict between, like, you know, which term people feel like is more PC. Really, like, I'll be curious to hear what Ava and Joe think of this too, but I personally think that it more so has to do with whatever makes somebody feel comfortable and feel seen. That's really what a term should do. I think sometimes people are afraid of the word bisexual because it can have a negative connotation, has been over-sexualized in the past. And that's really unfair that has had that, and that people can't, you know, be themselves because it has had that kind of connotation. Asexual, an absence of sexual attraction or interest in sexual activity. Now, there are certainly people who have experienced this due to other things in their life, whether it's psychological or emotional or physical things going on in their life. And it is legitimate that there are some people who genuinely are not sexually interested in at all. That just is also a legitimate thing. We have plenty of evidence of that now. Queer, this magical term that is scary to many people. I have a whole slide for that one. That deserves its own slide. We'll get there. Okay, before we get there, sexual identity versus gender identity. sexual orientation and gender identity, there's not a crossover. They're two totally separate bubbles. They are interrelated, but they are not interconnected. Okay, they are totally different. Why is it that they have gotten confounded over time? Well, there are times where people had thought, oh, okay, like maybe you want to change your gender identity because you're trying to be straight, or you want to change your, you want to feel this way because of something having to do with your attraction. The two are separate, okay? Gender identity there's a really great phrase that I think is helpful in understanding this. Gender identity is who you go to bed as. Sexual orientation is who do you go to bed with. Now, again, I just talked to you a whole page about not over-sexualizing it. So it's not just about sex. I recognize that too. But that's just to oversimplify it to make the point that it's about who you are versus attraction. Okay? This idea of heterosexism is this belief that superiority of heterosexuality over other sexual orientations is ingrained in American society and a systematic privilege heterosexual persons while oppressing the LGBT community. Like, this is the way it's supposed to be, and this is who we should be, and this is why a lot of stress is created for folks in the community. Basically, that there is an assumption that there is only one right way to be, and it's straight or cisgender, and we're going to get to what that is as well. This can create a culture of what we call heteronormativity that naturalizes heterosexuality as universal, expressed even when different gender expressions and sexualities are acknowledged. For example, asking who represents the male or female in a same-sex, quote-unquote, same-sex relationship. So, like, even if you acknowledge that, like, gay people exist, you might have this heteronormativity of, oh, there must be some sort of masculine and feminine representation, when that's also an assumption and not necessarily true. This is the genderbread person. I haven't done this presentation without ever getting to seeing people's faces before, so I'm glad I can see like at least a couple of the people who are doing this presentation's face too, because it does maybe seem silly. And the genderbread person is also very helpful. I'm a very visual person, so I like having a visualization. This is what's going to helping me illustrate what I'm trying to talk to you guys about. This one, there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more of a description. I'm gonna go back to this one because it's a little less busy, but at the top it's hilarious, so I have to read it to you. Gender is one of those things that everyone thinks they understand, but most people don't. Gender isn't binary. It's not either or. In many cases, it's both and. A bit of this, a dash of that. Tasty little guide is meant to be an appetizer for gender understanding. It's okay if you're hungry for more after reading. In fact, that's the idea. So, as you can see, the top, what we just talked about in the brain, this is identity. Identity comes from up here. There's no one, not your kid's therapist, not your kid's soccer coach, not you as your kid's parent, not your kid's sibling, not your kid's best friend who can tell you what your kid's identity is. I wish it was simpler. It's just not. We're going to get more into this. I know you have questions. Identity is how you in your head experience and define your gender based how you align or don't align with what you understand your gender options to be, okay? Sex is the physical traits you are born with. You see the little symbol between the little gingerbread person legs there. Is what we have come to know as sex characteristics, right? We're going to talk more about that too. Attraction, how you find yourself drawn to other people. That's our little heart. And then expression is how you present gender through your actions, clothing, demeanor, to name a few. And how you present are viewed based on social expectations, right? Like, I had my stepmom growing up would tell me that when I ran up the stairs, I sounded like a man. What? I didn't sound like a man. I was probably loud, right? That would have been a more accurate description, but for some reason it was gendered, right? So these are assigned labels that we socialize to try and push people into the spots we might want them to be in. As you can see on these arrows, these are the ranges. So someone might fall along these ranges. This is how we kind of come to understand gender identity, gender expression, sexual attraction, romantic attraction, anatomical sex. So I'm going to get to that one. We're going to get to that one next. That one might be confusing people. So this is a genderbread person. It's pronounced metrosexual.com. There's a lot of great resources there, great videos, great visuals, more descriptions. I really like that website. The guy wrote a book about it, basically because he was like, I think the guy wrote a book about it because I'm pretty sure everyone thought he was gay and he's not gay. And he's like, why is that? Why does everyone think I'm gay? And he wanted to try and understand this better. Okay, sex and gender. I love this Monty Python, The Meaning of Life. Anyone who's a Monty Python fan might realize this. Is it a boy or a girl? I think it's a little early to start imposing roles on it, wouldn't you? So sex refers to a person based on anatomy, someone who's born with external genitalia, internal reproductive system, hormones, chromosomes, described as male, female, or intersex. Intersex is a word we now use. Some people used to use hermaphrodite. There are various other words that were used. We don't use that anymore. Intersex is a more accurate word. Gender assignment is usually solely upon visualization of genitalia upon birth or upon, pre-birth, right? Like beforehand when people are looking at sonograms, etc. Rarely do people look at hormones, sometimes they look at chromosomes, internal reproductive system. That's not always looked at. Sometimes people don't find out they're intersex until later in life. I've known people who were born without a uterus. They didn't know until they didn't get a period. And when they're 20 years old, and they're like, why have I still not gotten my period? They were born without some of these things they don't know until later on in life. Intersex describes an individual whose sexual or reproductive anatomy are not considered traditionally male or female. Total number of people whose bodies differ from the standard male or female is actually 1 in 100 births. That's a lot of people. You might not think you know an intersex person. You might. They probably just never talk to you about it. It's something that's very controversial is people getting corrective surgeries at infancy. The standard of care now is the recommendation is to not do that until you know what the person's gender identity is going to be in case you guess wrong, and have that person make that decision when they're an age that they can identify their gender, because there have been some catastrophic mistakes made there before, and as long as the person can function safely, urinate, etc., then that's usually the recommendation. Gender identification is really one's self-identification as male, female, or genderqueer, or something else. This identification for many coincides with their assigned gender at birth. For example, I identify as female, and I was also assigned female at birth. So there are some people who that's not the case. And that would be someone who would be transgender. I am cisgender technically because I do align there. My gender expression doesn't always align, I don't think, with always what other people might say is traditionally female. However, I do identify that way. Sex is a component of gender, and it is not a determinant. gender expression is really well illustrated, I feel like, in this image. I really like a lot. Just shows how very slight changes in how someone presents can really change how someone else sees them. And I think it's very important to allow someone to play with gender and how they see themselves and how they see themselves in the world, because they're not hurting anyone. And the number one place for them to feel safe is typically within the family. The one thing that I always wish parents understood was those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. And I want parents to be the ones who don't mind, because I want them to be the ones who matter. And the ones who are like giving someone a hard time or bullying, like, just have my back, because those are the ones that don't matter, you know, if that's what they're worried about. What is gender nonconforming or gender non-binary? It refers to individual who manifestation of their gender identity does not coincide with the socially expected expression of gender roles. Now, this is a self identification, right? Like gender expression, I could look at this person and say like, oh, their gender expression in some of the top rows is not in alignment with, you know, what someone might assume of as female if they told me they identified as female, say. But I can't say that they're gender non-binary, because I don't know that. They didn't tell me that. You know, all I can make is an observation that, like, you know, their gender expression is more masculine, or the gender expression is more feminine, or, you know, just use more descriptive words. But only someone else can tell me if they identify as a gender non-binary. Transgender, as I just mentioned, umbrella term for an individual that has gender identification not typically associated with their biological sex or assigned gender at birth. Transition doesn't always have to happen. Not everybody goes through a transition. You can still be transgender and not go through a transition. The steps of a trans individual takes to present as their identified gender is what that is, not assigned gender at birth, that is. This may include solely outer gender expression, or it could also include some sort of medical transition, such as gender affirming surgeries, hormone therapies, puberty blockers, etc. I don't like to use the terms M to F or F to M, but medically, a lot of places still do that. Genital surgery remains out of reach for a lot of people, and some don't desire it. A lot of people don't desire it, and that's okay. And that's, you know, they live their full lives and feel okay. Cisgender, I explained that. Most, you know, if you identify with the sex, with the gender you were assigned at birth, then you are technically cisgender. Two-spirit is a Native American, for Indian First Nation term for those who blend masculinity and femininity. These individuals have historically actually been accepted and often revered in the Native community for their cross of gender boundaries. Really, really cool. What is a chosen name? A name that an individual, usually trans or non-binary, has given themselves that more accurately expresses their gender identity rather than using their given name. Sometimes they try this out with friends at school, places like Joe's group where they might feel more safe, or at, you know, the Triangle Center, or try pronouns out in other places. Pronouns are just the pronouns that you use: she, her, hers, he, him, his, they, them, theirs. Anyone who's struggling with they, them, theirs, I had to do an entire semester of work using Z and here. So that was ZE and HIR pronouns, which we don't really use anymore. So be happy that you're not using Z and here pronouns and use the they and them pronouns. They and them, just practice. It's just practice. You know, if you use it, you just don't know that you use it. Just say like, oh, what's their name? You know, like when you don't already know somebody's name or somebody's dog's name or somebody's new baby, like just try and get out of the habit of saying he or she, which we rarely say out loud anyway. Just say like, oh, what's their name? Oh, what did they tell you the other day? Like, you know, it's really practice, and that's what gets you going. And when I think about how hard it is to do that, I think about how hard it must be to really be that person who feels totally invalidated every day by hearing the incorrect pronoun. And we can talk more about that if there are questions. This should be respected even if their legal name has not been changed. Oh, here's my queer slide. I was wondering where that was. Okay, reclaimed self-affirming term for those who fall outside of the gender or sexual norms, sexuality norms, with different definitions depending on the context. It can be an umbrella term to describe the entirety of the sexual and gender minority community. You've already heard me say this, the queer community. It's widely recognized socially and academically. Like undergrad, I went to Syracuse. They had a queer studies like major there like 20 years before I even went there. Like, what was that, 10 years ago? So it, you know, it's accepted. It's just you don't want to call somebody a queer. You want to say they identify as queer if they identify that way, right? The same way you, like anything can be derogatory if you want it to be, like, look at that effing gay. Like, if you want it to be derogatory, it can be, sure. Individuals, it can also be an individual's sexual orientation if they feel like it does not neatly fit within another category, or choose not to more specifically categorize their sexual orientation. I like this word. Not everybody likes this word. I personally identify as queer. I feel like it just, the lack of a label is very comforting to me. That just like, not straight, if you want more information, inquire within. Perfect. Love it. What genderqueer is also another way people identify. It's totally appropriate to ask people when they identify as queer, what does that mean for you? It, you know, it's not doubting them. You're just saying, like, you know, I know that that means a lot of different things to different people. What does that mean for you? So I already mentioned that. I just also like this image here. Are you a boy or a girl? No, that's for genderqueer. And yeah, I said before I identify as female. So I identify as queer in terms of my sexual orientation, just to clarify. Okay, we're getting down to it. Okay, understanding self-identity. So even if someone's description of themselves falls into these terms, it doesn't mean that they identify with the term. Why is that? Perhaps they don't know the term, or they choose not to identify with the term. That's fine, but that person may want to explore whether or not it has anything to do with internalized homophobia. It may or may not, right? And that's not necessarily like your job to do. If you're a parent who's concerned about that, like, you can always bring it up with their therapist, or if you have that kind of relationship with them, like, you know, you told me that, you know, say they identify as male and they're attracted to males. You know, you told me that you're attracted to males and you really don't want to identify with any labels. Can you just explain to me what that's about? I just want to understand, you know, like, not, there's no right and wrong here. You just want to understand. That's fine. An individual can identify or not identify however they feel comfortable with whatever empowers them. Attentiveness to LGBTQ community should not only apply to those who have already told us that they are not straight or not cisgender, or we feel we can predict due to their exterior presentation. Like, we shouldn't just like only do this pertaining to people that we know or assume are in the community. Like, we should be attentive to pronouns for everybody. We should be, you know, attentive to how we talk about LGBTQ folks to everybody. We don't know what feelings are going on for people internally. We don't know what's going on within someone's family, and what might be going on for them. So many maybe don't know yet, or maybe haven't been in an environment that is allowed for some of the self-exploration that would be needed for them to really identify what's going on for them. That's okay. Some people don't understand who they are until way later, and that doesn't make their identity any less valid or more valid if it's younger in life or later in life. Are there more queer people now than ever? I get this question all the time. This is unlikely. LGBT people have always existed. However, people now have more language and resources to more easily understand their experience with gender, attraction, and/or sexuality. Therefore, more people may be identifying as part of the community than ever before. So openness and curiosity is expanding culturally. Are there actually more queer people? Unlikely. Can someone make someone else queer? No, absolutely not. Nope. Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. There's sometimes these questions of like, you know, did someone make, like, someone became friends with someone else, and like suddenly they're talking about these things that their friend who was like bisexual was talking about, or like their friend who was genderqueer was talking about, but they never talked about these things before. I think that's important to address. Someone might be exposed to someone who's in the queer community, but this cannot make them feel feelings that are not there. Questioning and exploration of sexual and gender identities is a natural phenomena, and as long as it is done safely, should be supported. So someone who is, there's a reason that that person was attracted to being friends with that individual in the first place. Why is that, right? What happened there that that person was so attracted to that? And it's, as long as it's done safely, that's all that matters. Like we just want to support what someone is figuring out about themselves. I won't go through all of these, but I just want you to know that they exist. Homophobia, irrational fear or hatred of gay people because of any behavior or belief that doesn't conform to any rigid role stereotypes. So sometimes people think like, oh, this means I hate gay people. It doesn't always mean that. Sometimes it can just mean that like you're really uncomfortable around something that doesn't meet any rigid stereotypes. Biphobia, fear, discrimination against bisexuals. Monosexism, this idea that being exclusively straight or exclusively gay is superior to being bisexual. Transphobia, the irrational fear of those who are gender variant, or inability to tolerate anybody who is gender ambiguous. And if there's something going on, like if I can't tolerate somebody who's gender ambiguous, like you might have a question at first, but I want you to ask yourself, what's going on? Why can't I? This might be new, and that's all it is. This is not dangerous. This is just somebody whose gender is more ambiguous than maybe the people I'm typically exposed to. That's probably okay.
Can I butt in for a second?
Totally.
Okay, so I want to mention that under the transphobia umbrella, there's a specific type of violence directed towards trans women,
Yes.
Trans misogyny, and we've seen that a lot more lately, especially in the media. J.K. Rowling has been in the media a lot lately for her disgusting words used against our trans sisters, and I think that the specific trans misogyny towards trans women should be mentioned because they face a specific degree of violence that a lot of us don't experience. So it's important to acknowledge the specific calibers of trans misogyny under transphobia.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Absolutely. The rates of violence towards trans women are insurmountable and disgusting, really. So there's a lot of work to be done, and it's a societal issue, I think. And it's a lot of misinformation that I think trickles into all of it, and I think it's really all of our problems. So thank you for that. And then internalized homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, the irrational fear of hatred of someone's own sense of self. If you might be a part of this community, or if you just might be even exhibiting some roles outside of what you've been taught is the norm, right? So like I told you about the guy who started that website, like if he started to really degrade himself for coming across to people as in a certain way that they started to think that, assume he was gay, and he really like was angry with himself about that. Even though he's not gay, he was still would still be experiencing what we would describe as internalized homophobia. I just want to talk about family acceptance before we get to Joe and Ava talking more. Family acceptance is critical in terms of mitigating risk for suicide for youth. So lifetime suicide attempts by LGBTQ adults rejected by families and adolescents. So for those who had low risk, this is just an image of like they just delineated it out so you could see those who had a high rejection rate had a much higher rate of suicide. There's direct correlation between rejection from families and high rates of suicide, which is very glaring and very disturbing. Also, family, right below that, family acceptance during adolescence and perceptions of being a happy LGBT adult. So for those who had extremely accepting parents, they perceived happy adulthoods. And those who did not have accepting families, you know, that was also a direct correlation. Over to the top right, some health risks. LGBT young adults who report having high levels of family rejection were, again, 8.5 times more likely to report attempting suicide, 6 times more likely to report high levels of depression, 3.5 more likely to use illegal substances, 3.5 more likely to engage in unprotected sexual intercourse, and then below that, family rejection is also correlated with higher risk of HIV. So it's not to scare anybody, it's just to relay facts of what we've been seeing, and this was from SAMHSA, and they have a lot of information on their website too. You can see on the bottom, samhsa.org. Challenges of finding our identity include being misunderstood, possible discrimination, fear, loss, self-doubt, what we call minority stress, and also rewards, finding pride in our true selves, finding community, feeling heard, feeling understood, finding love in family and others. How do we help? I want to leave this here and kind of think about some of the things here. Cultivate a non-judgmental and unassuming attitude, really, about whatever you talk about in your family, and really with your friends too. You know, when you think about what your friends talk about and how that might be portraying, just think about your community. Being humble. Each person's journey is different. It doesn't have to go the same way yours did. Listen and validate someone's experience. Allow for exploration and creativity with gender expression and all kinds of identity. Take a look at the book. This is a book for the parents of gay kids. It doesn't talk just about gay, it talks about gender as well. Ask yourself, is what I'm about to say going to potentially help or harm this relationship? Think about intent versus outcome. Educating yourself and support yourself and family, books, internet, PFLAG, parents. That's a parent group. There's one at the Triangle Community Center. It's fantastic. I would highly recommend. Becoming a visible and active ally to the community. Ask how you can be a good ally to a specific person or specific people, and advocate for your child or your child's friends where you can. And then with that, I will leave it to Joe and Ava.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having us, Stacy and Cheryl. We really appreciate it. I want to talk about something that's very passionate to me, and it's my LGBTQ teen group, Lighthouse. It is a program of kids in crisis and something that's very near and dear to my heart. I grew up a gay man, and I was in an unaccepting household. And, you know, I grew up one of 7 children in a big Catholic family, and I have 3 brothers, and they're all straight. And so I struggled with understanding my own sexuality and why was I attracted to men and why weren't they? And So, fast forward all these years, and this group is really helping me. So, what Lighthouse is a group, a peer-to-peer support group for LGBTQ teens and their allies to come and just be, right? It's a very relaxed social environment. Kids can just, are there to support one another. And, Micaela, you said something that so just echoed in my ears. You said, we just want to support what someone is figuring out about themselves. That's our group in a nutshell, right? So when a kid walks in the room, we're not judging them. And, if they, kids come in and say, I'm bi, I'm pan, I'm trans, I'm like, I don't care. That's great. Welcome to the group. And meet others who are like you. So it's just a place that's non-judgmental and confidential. So, this past year with COVID has been challenging, as it has been for everybody. And we started with Zoom in March. And frankly, it was terrible. It was terrible. And we had kids who are talking to us, on their cell phones, sitting in their closets, trying to talk about their issues and their problems. And while, mom and dad are listening at the door, it just wasn't working. So we sort of limped along through March and April, and finally in May, when it got nicer, we started to meet in Scully Park in Stamford. And we found sort of a private corner and found all these picnic tables, and we social distance and had food. And it's just been awesome. It's been a great summer. And I'm not looking forward to colder weather, and we soon will be moving inside. We are yet to decide where we're going to be. Probably we'll be at the Tully Center in Stamford. Not sure yet. Stay tuned. So we meet on Thursday nights in Scully, in Scully Park, and it's from 5 to 7 on Thursdays. And like I said, it's all LGBTQ identifying youth are welcome to come. I always say teens, but we're getting younger and younger kids. We're seeing, I've had kids as young as 11 walk into the group. We're seeing kids identify all over the spectrum. We see kids identify as trans. And again, it's not my place to judge them. It's what we offer is a space for kids to come and just be, and to be with one another, right? So that's what we offer. And Ava has graciously agreed to come along, and she's been coming to the group for a while now, and I've learned to really respect and admire Ava, and I just want her to talk and just tell us about, I don't know, her experience, or what your what do you think about the group? Like, what would you tell people about Lighthouse? There you
Hello.
go.
Hello, I'm Ava. I think I've been going to Lighthouse since I think 2017 or 2018, if I remember correctly, a few years back. And Lighthouse has always been, it's been such, I can't even put it into words. It's been so great to have Lighthouse. My family personally is accepting, and I'm extremely privileged to be in a position where my family accepts me for who I am, and I appreciate it every day. But unfortunately, a lot of my friends, especially in Lighthouse, they do not have families who accept them. And they live in environments where they cannot be themselves, where they cannot freely express themselves, where they have to live every day being misgendered and having this idea of heteronormativity being pushed on them. And I just love Lighthouse because it gives me and it gives my friends a place to be themselves, to fully express themselves, and a chance to be in a judgment-free zone where, you know, you have the right pronouns used for you. You're in an environment with people like you, and you can just talk about your experiences as, like, you know, a gay kid or a trans kid living in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And it's just like this connection and bond that we form that is very strong, and just this kind of solidarity that we have is so great. And I'm just very happy to have Lighthouse, and I'm very happy to have so many friends from so many different backgrounds and who identify in so many different ways. And I'm extremely lucky, and I'm extremely grateful to have Lighthouse in my life.
And we are lucky to have you as part of the group. And I will say that the kids who are in the group are very warm and present, and will listen to you, and will listen to, you know, when a new kid walks in the room, that's hard. It's a hard thing. And if you identify as LGBTQ, to come to a meeting like that and you're 15 or you're 14, and to come into a group of strangers, it's scary, and we get it. And all the kids in this group get it too. So, you know, to all the parents out there, if you have a kid identifying on the LGBTQ spectrum, send them to Lighthouse, bring them to one of their meetings. And, you know, it's not for everybody. Some kids are very shy and quiet, and they don't want to share their feelings. And but it's a wonderful resource, and it's a wonderful place to just come and simply be yourself. You know, and what we practice at Lighthouse is the power of listening, right? We listen. There's a lot of power into just listening to your kid and to who they are, and like, don't come back with judgment. Don't try to fix the problem, right? We're not trying to fix anything. We're not trying to make someone straight or make them gay or make, you know, we're listening, and we're peer-to-peers. So, you know, it's been a wonderful group, and I have done this for over 8 years now. I can't believe it. I have been running this group, and we are proudly associated now with Kids in Crisis, which is just an amazing organization. Go to their website. And just so everybody knows too, we have Kids in Crisis has a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline that you can call. It's 203-661-1911. And there, it's not just for kids, it's for parents. If you have questions, kids like anything from I'm lonely to I'm, you know, really panicked, right? I don't want to be here anymore. Anything in between. So it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. I highly suggest that you take advantage of that. So that's my spiel on Lighthouse, and I hope to see some New Canaan kids. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. It's lighthouse@kidsincrisis.org. It's a really easy email. lighthouse@kidsincrisis.org. I'm happy to answer any questions. No questions are too dumb, right? So if you have, if there's a question on your mind, I guarantee it's on 2 other people's minds at least, right? So go ahead and fire away with any of your questions. We'd love to hear them. And thank you, Ava, for coming tonight. We really appreciate it, and I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay, I don't see any questions in the Q&A or the chat, so I'll just say quickly, last call for questions. Anyone? Okay. Well, I want to thank Cheryl, Joe, Micaela, and Ava for joining us tonight. And I'd also like to thank everyone who came to listen tonight, to listen, to grow, to understand, and learn. And so we're thankful that you all joined us tonight. I just see something in the chat. Let me check it before we sign off. A wonderful comment. Thank you, everyone. That was awesome. Oh, and there's something else. I love sharing these comments because I think it's important. Fantastic program. We appreciate the education. Also, there's a Kids in Crisis counselor at New Canaan High School. Please email me if you'd like to touch base. And that's gburke@kidsincrisis.org.
Yes.
Yes. Welcome. It's Grace, correct? Yes, welcome. And very informative. Thank you.
I'm just sharing my email with everybody. If anybody has a question after, you can email me anytime.
Great.
I'll give you guys mine also.
Perfect.
Oh, I did that privately. Oops. Hold on, I'll send it to everybody. Thank you guys so much. And I've also been to Lighthouse back not a while ago, a couple years ago.
You need to come back.
I know, I do.
You're one of
And
my
it was
favorite
so
guests.
fun. I loved being there. It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I know. We need to have you back so soon, and come visit us in the park.
Totally. Oh, we got to figure out what's going on when it starts getting chilly.
I know. We will.
Well, I thank you all. And one thing to note, if you joined late, just so you know, this is recorded. It will be put on the New Canaan Library YouTube channel, and it will be put on the New Canaan Cares YouTube channel. So I'm hopeful probably in a week, maybe Cheryl will get that done, give or take. And with that, I think we will say goodnight, and we will thank everyone. And enjoy your evenings.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.